this Wednesday edition of the Flagship. I'm your host, Zach Berry. Joining me, Mr. David Brandt of the Associated Press. Show brought to you each and every day by the good folks at College Corner. 3 locations, Oxford, Flowood, and Bridgeland. You can also check them out, collegecornerstore.com. If you would like to get some new swag, get some new tailgating supplies, maybe a gift or two, College Corner has you covered. The new location in Oxford, 4,000 plus square feet. Scott and the folks over there will take care of you as they take care of us here each and every day as we host the Flagship in the College Corner studios. David, good morning. I know you are busy getting ready for the Final Four. How are we doing this fine Tuesday morning in Arizona?
Doing good. It's one of those weeks in Phoenix where there's a lot going on. The Yankees are in town playing the Diamondbacks, and then we've got a little Final Four later this week. So plenty to do, but that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying busy. I know as we were talking before the show, you will be primarily focused on the Crimson Tide. We'll get to that in the second segment of the show. But first, Kirby Smart in the news had some comments about kind of the expanded 12-team playoff, and they're basically talking about generally I guess who the biggest benefactors will be and kind of what it takes to win it all as someone who has coached a team to win it all. If you haven't seen already, FanDuel released its odds. 11 teams holding odds at plus 2,800 or better. Ole Miss coming in at plus 1,500 right now. At the very top, you've got Georgia plus 300, Ohio State plus 480, Texas plus 700, Oregon plus 850, Alabama, surprisingly, plus 1,300. And David, maybe the most surprising of all, LSU plus 1,500. I still don't get it. But what initial thoughts after seeing the odds there for Ole Miss?
Well, the first thought I think is 5 of the 7 top teams are SEC.
Yeah.
Tells you, and I mean, a lot of it, like you said, I think there's a lot of kind of name brand going on here. And I get it, with early odds and stuff like that, you pick your comfortable teams. But like you said, LSU, Alabama, a lot of unknowns with those programs. I mean, yes, they do have a history over the past many, many years of being very good. So I understand why they're up there. But this seems more of a a reputation list than maybe necessarily who really has the best odds and some, which again, I get it this early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not technically talking season yet, but that's what we're doing. You got nothing else to do. I mean,
it's always talking season for me. Always talking season. As my wife says, quit talking.
What are you going to talk about? Spring practice where it's like, oh man, everybody's bigger, faster, stronger.
Right. I mean, at some point, it's like everybody looks good.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so Kirby.
Coach, you going to throw to the tight end more this year?
Hey, what's insert player here doing after that red shirt year? How's he looking?
Right, exactly. Sorry, I cut you off.
But. No. Those are always fun. Yeah, Kirby sat down with Chris Lowe of ESPN, did a Q&A. Talking about the expanded 12-team field, the group of teams that can win, 3 or 4 games is even smaller than a contenders list in seasons past. So, couple interesting quotes here. Kirby said, quote, "It keeps your hopes alive with 1 loss, maybe 2." Which I
absolutely
agree.
Absolutely.
That's what I've been saying all offseason. We've talked about it on this show. Ole Miss can go 10-2. Who cares about Atlanta? Go 10-2 and get that extra week off and then see what happens. He also said, this one's a little bit more of an extensive quote here. He said, "A lot of coaches have complained that once they lost a game, their kids just said that they were done. there won't be as much of that. Everybody's fighting for the same thing, and that's the beauty of making those last 3 or 4 weeks really, really eventful. I know some people say, quote, it devalues the late season games because you'll know you're in. Well, there will be more people in the hunt now, so there will be a lot of meaningful games. That team with 2 losses late in the year that has played a tough schedule is going to be fighting and scratching to earn that 12 spot. So, like, obviously the biggest benefactors here are the Big Ten and the SEC. More than
Sure.
likely going to have a better strength of schedule. So yeah, like a 9-3 Ole Miss or a 9-3 LSU, not necessarily mathematically out of it.
No,
So
and I think the most important part there is I think that, and I didn't really think about it this way, but I think Kirby's absolutely right, is that with NIL, and just top prospects playing for the NFL, which I totally understand. If your team loses 2 games, now you're out of it. What carrot is there to keep going other than just loyalty to the school, which some guys have, but a lot of guys, it's sort of a means to an end. I think he's right that I think there will be a much bigger stigma for players who opt out when your team's in the playoff. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like and I don't think as many players will do that because it's high level games that they're playing that they can put on their NFL tape. And I think that does mesh well with the NIL scene, putting 12 teams in the playoff or however many teams there is now, 28.
yeah,
But I do think it keeps teams engaged longer, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, we look at the NCAA basketball tournament right now. If there were only, say, 8 teams that got into the NCAA tournament, Alabama wouldn't even have been one of them. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
that was a good team, and they obviously showed that. And I know, kind of apples and oranges, basketball, football, it's different sports, but I
Right.
do think that the thing that stays the same is if you give more teams access to potentially winning a title, then you have more upsets, more, just upheaval. So I think that's generally good for college football. I think it also meshes well with NIL.
What do you think about um, this write up is coming from our guy Jesse Simonton at On Three. With this expanded playoff, the national title, the national title winning team or the national champion will play 17 or 18 games. Has never been done. Um, I don't really look at that as like a big deal because I've been saying for years, the football championship subdivision, they've been playing a bracket the whole time.
Right. I don't think it matters much at all, to be quite honest. I mean, even if you win a state championship in high school football, you're going to play 15 or 16 games a lot of times, especially in the bigger states. I know in
Yeah,
Texas they play at least 15, like if you
yeah,
make the finals. So, I mean, yeah, playing 17 or 18 football games is a lot, but the pros do it. And that's what all these guys want to be. And,
yeah.
I just don't think. And again, we're only talking about 2 teams that are playing that 17th game or 18th game.
Yeah, it's not everybody.
Most teams are playing 12 or 13. Some will play 14, some will play 15, but
Right.
very few schools. You got to earn the right. I don't think anybody's going to be complaining about playing that 17th game if they're actually in it. So I mean, honestly, I think that's a non-factor. You used to hear that a playoff, and this was even more ridiculous, would mess up like fall finals for players, because you're playing all through December. I think we finally moved beyond that one. So I think
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I think they'll figure out the academics at this point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that was always the laugher for me.
Right. How much
Where
school are they going to miss? Oh, come on.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah, it was always ridiculous to me. I mean, the great Cardell Jones, was famous for, we ain't come to play school. Uh, we're here to play football. I mean,
Yes.
um, the one thing that Jesse points out here, and this is a good jumping off point for Ole Miss specifically here, is, a longer schedule, probably need a deeper roster. Injuries are going to happen. People are going to get banged up. You're going to need the depth later in the season just because naturally fatigue is going to happen when you play, a 12-game regular season. It's really tough. And then you get in the playoffs. But, Jesse poses the question, how does this affect Ole Miss and Missouri? Two teams that are expected to be in the run for the college football playoff. And he made the case of, on paper, Ole Miss, Missouri don't have the blue chip type roster that Georgia, Ohio State, and all those other schools have. But that's where the portal comes in. And I think that's why Ole Miss has so much hype this year because of what the offense brings back, adding Juice Wells, adding those offensive linemen, those pieces on the offensive line, the two behemoths from Washington. You bring in a guy from Southern Miss that's an experienced guy that's played a ton. You bring in Diego Pounds, the number 1 left tackle in the portal. And then, oh, by the way, you flip it over to defense. And David, it's probably, at least on paper, we'll see how they do on the field. On paper, the best defense that Ole Miss has had since 2014. And we all know
that's saying a lot. Yeah, that 2014 defense was great. So
that was real deal, top 10.
I know I'm not the first person to say this, but I love the name Diego Pounds, by the way. What a great name, especially for a big man.
Yeah, I will say this. I took one for the team on this one. Do not search Diego Pounds Media on Twitter.
I was about to say something else like that. That is bordering on porn star territory.
Yeah, I was looking for some cut-ups of him, just some film. Don't do that.
No.
At least don't do it like at a bar while I was waiting on takeout food where people are standing around me. And I was like, whoa, swipe
that
up.
Reminds me, like, sorry to open like old wounds for Ole Miss fans, but before everything, there was 4 or 5 reporters that knew kind of what was going on with Hugh Freeze at the time. And I was doing a lot of research at the time, and I had to call my boss, and I was like, I'm researching some sites that are not PG rated. You know what I mean? Like, you understand what I'm saying, boss? And he was like, oh, he's like, I get it. He's like, you're safe. But I was like, before I get on my work computer and start searching these websites, like, I need to have some confirmation that, we're all okay here. This is all work. So yes.
Does incognito mode actually work on a work computer?
Right, exactly. It was like, who's watching me here? I'm on this VPN into my company. I don't know.
David, I was put on some background noise last night while I was working, and according to the Born Supremacy, the NSA can just grab a phone call from anybody at any point, and they can locate you and triangulate you, and
And they have the cameras that zoom in on you exactly where you are, the satellites from space.
So everyone's always watching. But yeah, I mean, on paper, this Ole Miss team probably top to bottom the most talented ever. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic there at all. I think that's true.
No, it would be hard. I think the defense, at least on paper, is right there with 2014. And I think the offense, top to bottom, might be a little better. And that's saying because that offense on 2014 was pretty good. But
yeah,
I agree.
And the big thing for me defensively is it's all 3 levels.
Right.
You have the big name dudes, Walter Nolan, Prince Umanmielen up front, but then you get Pooh at linebacker, and you've got Suntarian Perkins is back at linebacker. And then in the secondary, you bring John Saunders back, a guy that's played a lot of football and was really good for you a year ago. And you bring in Yam Banks. You also get Amorian Walker, a high ceiling guy from Michigan that before the injury, Harbaugh said he was going to challenge for starting snaps on the defense. And that is a defense that won a national title.
Yeah, that was special last year.
Yeah. And then you're also getting Trey Amos, who gets the stamp of approval from Nick Saban and played for him. So it's This team is, I don't think it's crazy. Like when I said all Ole Miss has to do is go 10-2 and they can get into the playoff, I don't think that is crazy to think. I mean, I think this Ole Miss team,
No,
are we getting close to, if you don't make the playoff, it's a disappointment territory?
I mean, I think we're kind of there. To be honest, like
Yeah.
after all we've talked about a little bit, I mean, they could just miss out. It wouldn't be like a disaster of a year, but yeah, I mean, this team expects to be, especially with what they've done the last 3 or 4 years since Lane Kiffin has come. This is a team that expects to be in the top 10 or 15 in the country, and that is right on the borderline of being a playoff team. And I think talking about how this is an advantage for teams like Ole Miss with the transfer portal. I think when kids now are looking at a place to go and they're in the transfer portal, there's more than one program. There's more than even 4 or 5 programs. There's somewhere more in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 programs each year that you can be like, yeah, they got a chance to make the playoffs. Like maybe not a great chance, but some do, some don't. I just think it opens the door for teams like you don't necessarily always have to go to Alabama or Georgia or Michigan, to play in the title game. And so,
Right.
or at least have that shot. And so I think it just opens the door, opens the possibilities for teams that have historically been on that kind of second tier, knocking on the door. In the SEC, that would be, the Ole Misses of the world, the Missouris, even to some level, the South Carolinas, Tennessee to some degree, although they've been good the last couple of years. I just think it kind of widens the pool of what would be considered going to an elite program.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way that the Q&A went with Kirby and just talking about the importance of, winning important games late, avoiding those landmines late in the year, not looking ahead. We always talk about winning your clunkers and, avoiding those. A road SEC game against a team you're supposed to beat. You got to win those games late. But Jesse Simonton kind of came to the conclusion of we're probably talking 5, 6 teams that have a legitimate shot. And I think Ole Miss is in that group. I don't think it's crazy to say that anymore.
What you mean from the SEC? There's 5 or 6 teams.
Just no overall.
Oh, that have a chance at the title.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be just like basketball. It's going to be like get in the tournament and see what happens. And that if Ole Miss has a clunker at some point and or even 2 and goes 10-2, you're still like the 10th team in the playoff, and you see what happens. You take your shots, and I mean, I think at that point, all those teams are capable of getting hot on a 3-week stretch and winning it all. And to be honest, I think this benefits programs just like Kirby's at Georgia and Alabama, because those rare years where a team at Alabama or Georgia is a little off, has to find themselves a little,
Yeah.
and might go 10-2, might have a loss or 2 in there. It doesn't automatically, it keeps them, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we have some teams that have crazy playoff streaks. Like if this format continues for 15 or 20 years, I bet there's some schools that have 8-10 year streaks in it, just because
Yeah.
you don't have to be perfect every year to make the postseason. And I think I just think I don't really see the downside for anybody on this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think this is only going to make for more compelling games late in the
Yeah,
year.
and the whole thing that late games in the regular season don't matter. Yeah, they will. I mean, there's going to be a couple that, yes, you're like, all right, both these teams are 11-1. They're going to be, but it's going to mean playoff positioning. It's going to mean maybe
Exactly.
getting
Hosting a
to
game.
host a home game. Yeah, I mean, like there's going to be stakes on the table, and yes, it's not necessarily losing you're out, but that'll come. Like every other sport manages to do it, and it works just fine. And there's plenty of
Yeah.
drama and all that stuff. I really think that there's going to be very few games that this affects, and even the ones that it does affect, there will be stuff to play for. Like you said, a home playoff game, different things like that. I think there's going to be a lot of situations where it looks like both teams are in the tournament, but if one team loses, it's going to get dicey. You know what I mean? Like depending on what
Yeah.
happens. I think you're going to have very few clear-cut games where it's like, oh, this game doesn't matter. Let's just move on. I don't think that's going to happen, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about this. And I know it's a rivalry game, so it's always going to matter and it's always going to mean something. But look at this year. Let's say in November, late November, you got a 10-1 Ole Miss team hosting Mississippi State that, let's say they're 5-6. That game is going to mean a hell of a lot to Ole Miss because, like we just said, probably trying to play to host a first round game versus if you go 10-2, if you
With a
get
loss
tripped
to
up,
5-6 Mississippi State, yeah, you're kind of on the border.
And how is that going to affect seeding? Not only, well, there's 4 10-2 teams, but Ole Miss lost to a team that's 6-6.
Yeah.
How's that affect where you're ranked in the bracket? So yeah,
I think it's even more interesting for like those games like maybe Clemson, South Carolina, or the Iron Bowl. Like say Alabama's 10-1 and Auburn's 9-3 or 9-2 or something like that. And Auburn's kind of, Alabama's number like 4, Auburn's number 11. Like that's a huge game. I mean,
yeah.
for Alabama and Auburn, because Alabama's in, but that could be a home hosting situation for Auburn. You almost have to win that game to be in. So I think there's going to be a lot more of games that fall into those categories than like 2 teams that are obviously in the playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just going to be even better because
I totally agree. And I've been arguing that for, since I had hair.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously Mississippi State wants to beat Ole Miss, but it's also beat Ole Miss and ruin them, a chance to host a first round game, make tons of revenue, the first ever college football playoff, first round game could be in Oxford, Mississippi. That would be, a huge accomplishment for Lane Kiffin and the program. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see those types of programs that are taking a back seat that year are going to look to play spoiler even more because of what's at stake. So, yeah, I think
there's just more opportunities to play real spoiler.
Exactly.
Instead of sending a team from maybe the Peach Bowl to the Capital One Bowl or something like that. I mean, I think this is a lot different.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. I'm pumped.
Yeah, I have zero qualms with that. I've been waiting for this for years and years and years.
The College Corner is headed to Oxford. Stop by their new location in the Oxford Commons off Sisk Avenue. They'll have 4,000 square feet of Rebel gear ready for your trip to the Grove. On your next trip to Oxford, stop by the College Corner or our other great locations in Ridgeland and Flowood. Hats, shirts, polos, pullovers, sweats, t-shirts. College Corner has it all. And as always, you can visit us online at collegecornerstore.com. That's collegecornerstore.com. The College Corner, where your game day apparel meets.
Call Drew Moak of USA Benefits Group. He can help you with any of your health insurance needs. Drew is an Ole Miss grad located in Mississippi and licensed in 7 states. He works with the nation's second largest health insurance brokerage with access to 35 different carriers, regular health plans, to life insurance, to dental and vision, and even Medicare. He has it all covered. Now more than ever, it is critical to have a health insurance agent who is local and accessible. So call Drew Moak at 601-953-8449. 601-953-8449 and get your free quote today.
Hi, this is Kevin Kessinger, former Ole Miss baseball player, son of Ole Miss Hall of Famer Don Kessinger, and dad to Ole Miss All-American shortstop Gray Kessinger, and your local community banker with B&A Bank. B&A Bank has invested 125 years in our communities, and we know the needs of North Mississippi businesses better than anyone. As a commercial lender with B&A Bank, my priority is Oxford, and I'd love to help you and your business with any lending needs.
Visit www.bnabank.com to learn more. B&A Bank, local, invested, modern banking. Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Real quick, before we get into the final segment, talk Final Four, who we got winning on Saturday, getting to the title game on Monday. Do want to remind you, podcast is also brought to you by Drew Moak and USA Benefits Group. Drew, Ole Miss grad, located in Mississippi, but he's also licensed in 7 states. He can help you with anything from Medicare to Medicaid to regular health plans, life insurance, dental, vision. He's got it all covered. He has access to 35 different carriers, and he works for the second largest health insurance brokerage in the country. Give him a call, 601-953-8449, or check him out, usabg.com/DMOAK, and get your free quote. It is imperative to not only have an agent that is local and accessible, and Drew is both of those. So he can help you out. Cut those premiums by as much as 20 to 30%. Give him a call today, 601-953-8449, or check out the website and get your free quote. All right, David, you are on the ground. You are there. We've got UConn taking on NC State. And then we have, Purdue taking on NC State, UConn taking on Alabama.
I was like, oh no, I've got the wrong games. Oh no. What have I been researching the past couple days? What have I done? You scared me. Stop that, Zach.
Apologies. 2 very compelling games. You've got the look, it's 2 different types of unstoppable forces in UConn and Alabama, where you've got UConn that I think is probably one of the most complete college basketball teams since maybe 2012 Kentucky. That 8th Wonders team was pretty special. This UConn team is just, look, I was at a friend's house last weekend, David, during UConn, Illinois, and so I was chasing kids around. We were having a good time hanging out. So I didn't get to watch the whole game, but every time I looked at the TV, it just looked like an and one mixtape tour. Like, it was insane.
It's just, there was a 30-0 run in an Elite 8 game.
It's never happened before, ever.
Against a team, Illinois, that has one of the best offensive ratings.
The number 1 offense per efficiency ratings. Yeah.
Right. Like, that is bonkers. Like, I've only seen that. Like, I covered a December basketball game one time at the Mississippi Coliseum between Southern Miss and USC Upstate or something like that. And Southern Miss went on a 28-0 run. And I never thought I'd see that again. But we saw it in the Elite 8. That was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
It's incredible. Just talking with people about just how good this UConn team is. And look, you got a true sophomore lottery pick in Klingon. You've got another 3 or 4 sophomores that came back from the national title team last year. You've got a true freshman coming off the bench that knows his role and does it well. Hurley's pushing all the right buttons. And then Alabama, we were talking about this before we hit record. Alabama can shoot the lights out, but you still got to slow down UConn somehow. Because Alabama could hit 15 threes. And Grant Nelson could play out of his mind, and Mark Sears could do his thing, and Alabama could still lose because UConn's that good.
Oh, there's no question. UConn, the best quote probably, it just stuck with me for some reason. When I was talking with Andy Kennedy years ago, we were talking about somebody who had started to play better, maybe Terrence Henry or somebody like that. And he was like, he goes, David, he's like, confidence is a simple word, but it's a powerful word. And if you get confident, and that the UConn team is just playing supremely confident right now. They look like this is their tournament. It's like the UConn Invitational. That's the most impressive thing. Is it a talented team? Absolute. For all the reasons you just stated. Is it a well-built team? Yes. Is Dan Hurley a good coach? Yes. But there's been plenty of those teams over the years, even this year, Houston, Kelvin Sampson, that roster was great. They still have a tough game and they fall. UConn, at least to this point, seems almost immune to that. And they seem like they're almost getting better because, I'm not the first one to talk about this. It's not just that they've reached the Final Four again. It's that they're just destroying teams. Destroying other very good, really good basketball teams, by 20, 30 points. It's impressive.
It's
Right. It's not impossible to beat them. They lost by 19 to Creighton. They lost by 15 to Seton Hall. It happens even to the best of us. So even, the one thing I think Alabama has that it's had going for it all year, it's the highest scoring team in the country. And I think if they get on a heater, they make it really tough for anybody, even UConn. This is a team that averages almost 91 points a game. I think if Alabama gets this game into the high 80s, into the low 90s, you turn it into a track meet. I mean, UConn can do it. Like, I'm not saying they can't, but I don't think that's the game exactly they want to play. They want to keep this in the 70s. So I want to see if Alabama comes out hitting some 3-pointers and this turns into a high scoring contest. I think they've got a chance. But I mean, UConn so far looks pretty invincible.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think. I look at this point. Like, how can you pick against UConn?
Right, exactly. I mean, I totally agree. I think Alabama has a good chance, and they're rolling too and playing good basketball. That win over North Carolina in the Sweet 16 was really fun.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of proved they can knock off an elite team. But yeah, this is another step up, as far as what they've got to play the game of their year.
Yeah. Last I heard, it was like 14 and a half was the spread. We'll see. I'm going with the Huskies. At this point, I was telling people, like, everything else is just a play-in game to see who gets obliterated by them in the title game. On the other side, you've got Purdue, you've got NC State. I mean, arguably one of the better generational talents we've ever seen playing for Purdue and Zach Edey. And then you have the story of the tournament, 11 seed NC State winning, what is it, 9 games in 9 days or something crazy? I mean, the run to,
well, they won 5-5 in the ACC tournament,
Okay.
and then they had to. They're on a 9-game winning streak, probably total, but they won the 5 games in 5 days, which had never been done in the ACC tournament. And I'm not sure if it had ever been done in any tournament since we started debuting these like wild brackets where there's like triple buys and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, again, like, it's a little bit of a lesser factor than UConn, but NC State is a confident team right now. They're playing well. They're playing hard. They've got some shooters. They've got that big guy. His name is escaping me at this point, but
DJ Burns.
Yes, the DJs. Yeah, having the DJs.
Him and DJ Horn.
Right. DJ Horn, who where he played? Arizona State. He transferred from Arizona State. And there has been Arizona State fans are not very happy these days with Jaden Daniels transferring to LSU and now DJ Horn going. There's a lot of talent leaving Arizona State and having success in other places these days. So,
another thing, people forget where DJ Burns' career started.
I'm all ears.
He started at Tennessee.
Oh, I kind of remember that, actually. Boy, that Purdue Tennessee game was a really nice game. That was, and it opened my eyes because Zach Edey, obviously he's really good, and I knew that going in, and I've watched him several times. But that was the first time I had really seen him step up huge in a huge game. You know what I mean? It was kind of like watching Caitlin Clark last night or something like that. Rise to the occasion of a big game. Zach Edey against a team that's known for being physical, and that's what Tennessee does. And Zach Edey took everything that handled it. What he ended up with, like 40 and 17 or something like that. I mean, just really a generational performance that late in the tournament. Good stuff. And that's what you want to see. You just want to see the best players play well. And I think we've got the personal stories of the Zach Edeys, the DJ Burns, kind of that thing. And then we've got teams like UConn and Alabama that are just really interesting with differing styles. So this is a fun Final Four to me, not just because I'm covering it, but I think it's just a good one.
The hype of Zach Edey versus Dalton Knecht was as advertised. It was a great game.
Yeah, Connect almost shot him into it, because that he nearly single-handedly pulled that one off. It was, but that, yeah, I mean, you love it when games rise to the occasion, when they match the hype. And so far in this tournament, like men's and women's, I think we've had several games do that, because that LSU Iowa game was really good last night. So yeah, that's the good stuff you want to see. I hope we get a few more before the season ends.
Yeah, I think we will. I was telling all my Tennessee buddies, it's just unfortunate that run had to end for Tennessee, because it was a team that was built to make it to Phoenix. Rick Barnes had a great team, and you just run into arguably one of the most dominant players ever in college basketball history.
Right. I was about to say, if you're Tennessee, and Barnes talked about this afterwards, there's nothing to, it's disappointing, but I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed about. They played pretty well. They just lost to a really good team. I mean, I think there was maybe 5 or 6 teams in the country that were better than Tennessee, and Purdue was one of them. It happens.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Beard almost nailed it when I went to that Ole Miss Tennessee game in January, when the Vols just embarrassed Ole Miss. And in the post game, Beard said, that's a Final Four team. And without Zach Edey, Tennessee's in Phoenix right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, Purdue needed every bit of those 40 points and all those rebounds. I got Purdue winning. I think Edey's too good. I think they're the better team. I think this week off, in my opinion, hurts NC State. It kills a little bit of the momentum. And I just think
they start thinking about stuff a little bit.
Yeah,
I think so too.
You're probably getting, where it's like, oh, like we're worried about it. And I just
oh
think,
my God. Well, but you're like, oh, we're in the Final Four. How do we, you know what I mean? Like, I do think you're right that there's, at least for a lot of people, the less time you have to think about it, the better things go. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to, Purdue and UConn looks like that's going to happen. I do think if there's an upset in the semifinals, I like Alabama over UConn more than I do NC State over Purdue. But
I do too.
I think both of those are really, those are tall mountains to climb for Alabama and NC State. But if one of them's going to do it, I think Alabama can, just because, again, that offense, like if they get on a heater, it's just going to be really tough.
Yeah. Last thing here before we get out of the studio, for all the people that are just saying, well, Zach Edey's only good because he's 7'4", and well, he gets every call and blah blah blah. Let me just run you through the numbers here. This is thanks to Matt Norlander, CBS Sports. I'm assuming he did all the research. I heard this on podcast College Sports Now. Shout out to our buddy Stephen Hartzell, friend of the program. Zach Edey, first player in tournament history to have 40 points and 15 rebounds since Bo Kimball in 1990. First player with 40-plus without a three-pointer since Danny Manning in 1987.
Wow.
First player with 13 made field goals, 13 free throws, and 13 rebounds since Bill Bradley in the 60s. First player averaging 30 and 15 through 4 games since Elvin Hayes. First player to lead the nation in scoring and make the Final Four since Oscar Robertson in 1960. First player with multiple 30 and 15 games since Cedric Maxwell in 1977. First player with 5 consecutive 20 and 10 games in the NCAA tournament since David Robinson in the 80s. And finally, first player with 900-plus points, 450-plus rebounds since Larry Bird did it in 78-79.
Those are some pretty good names. And here's my deal. At the very beginning, it's like, he's just good because he's big. Yeah. I mean, that's part. I mean, yes, he's 7'4", he's strong, and that makes him good. People used to say the same thing about Shaq. He was a really good player too. Like, yes, he was bigger than everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes, he's kind of hard to officiate, but so, like, I mean, and to me, what Edey is doing is in some ways even more impressive than some of his predecessors in the paint, just because it's a guard's game these days. It's 3-point shooting. And I mean, I'm not saying, there's other good big guy. I mean, DJ Burns, we just got done talking about him, or a Kyle Filipowski, but a lot of big men now are kind of inside outside guys, guys who can pop out to the 3-point line, hit a 3-pointer, even if they're not exactly a 3-point shooter. Zach Edey is a big man, and he plays like a big man, and he does the little stuff and gets beat up, as much as he's big and it's hard to officiate him. He gets hacked all the time too, just like Shaq did back in the day, and every, gigantic person that's ever played the game. It's hard to officiate those guys just because they're sort of in a different weight class than everybody else. And so you want to be fair, but that's difficult to do. So anyway, Zach Edey deserves all the praise he gets. I think if anything, maybe I think the Tennessee game kind of gained some respect for him. But if anything, before that game, I think he was a little underrated.
Yeah, I mean, he went from a 3-star prospect who moved from Toronto to IMG Academy to focus on basketball. He worked with a specialist on the side, like a coach, like a front court, a post specialist to get him better. Like, he didn't even play on IMG's like varsity team. Like, he was on their JV team and he didn't even start. He chose Purdue over Baylor and St. Mary's. He had some other high major interests, but nobody really. I mean, famously, Rick Barnes went to IMG Academy to scout and recruit and didn't think anything about Zach Edey. But looking at like what he's done, I mean, another stat that blows my mind, there are only 4 players ever to average 30 and 15 through 4 games in a single NCAA tournament. I already mentioned Elvin Hayes. Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain are the others.
That's pretty incredible. Those are some names that they're throwing around.
I mean, he's going to be the first back-to-back National Player of the Year since Ralph Sampson, who was another big man that was dominant. I mean, we're getting to where he is as influential on a game as Lou Alcindor was when they outlawed the dunk because he was too good. And like, that's the thing, you mentioned it. It's hard to officiate him because he's 7'4" and he's 300 pounds and he moves so well. Like, it's not just like, hey, I'm just going to sit here and then I'm going to try to dunk it. Like, he has agility. And probably my shout out to my buddy Jason Thomas. He brought this up. I was like, damn, you're right. The amount of minutes he plays is remarkable. I think he sat like 30 seconds in the Tennessee game and then came right back in. Like, he plays the whole game. Right. So it's more than just, oh, he's tall. Like, he's skilled. He's legit. Evan Miyakawa did a graph using the Bayesian performance rating, which measures overall player value. And basically the graph is titled, or like the project that he did was, is Zach Edey just tall? And just comparing him to like other people that are as tall. He has the highest BPR ever recorded for any D1 player since 2011. So it's not just, oh, he's just tall. And like, he has his own tier on the graph where it's him this year, last year, and then the year before when he was second team all Big Ten. So yeah, it's much more like, wow, he's just big. Like, nah, he's just like, you don't just, just fall into being back-to-back National Player of the Year.
Right. I mean, if Zach Edey was, let's be real. If Zach Edey was 6'10", he wouldn't be Zach Edey. He'd be a very good player, but he wouldn't be what he is now. Yeah, like, yes, being big is part of it, but I mean, there's been 7'4" people before. There's been, people over. I mean, Ole Miss had a 7'5" guy this year, and I didn't see him playing like Zach Edey. No disrespect, but he wasn't playing like Zach Edey. Like, there have been, Sean Bradley's running around college basketball in the NBA for a long time. That happens. The Suns, the most popular player on the Phoenix Suns this year is Bol, who played for Oregon. He's he is fun to watch, but he's not playing like Zach Edey. So anyway, yes, being tall helps Zach Edey and being a big man, but you also there's other big guys. There's other, it's not everything. And what he's doing is very special.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I hope that Purdue can pull it off because I want to see Zach Edey and Purdue against UConn.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, upsets are fun, but that's a really cool title game, a real heavyweight clash. So I think, I think that's going to happen. And I think that, for college basketball, I think it would be good to have that kind of, Duke versus UNLV type title game, the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, I got Purdue, UConn meeting in the final. Probably UConn.
It's just, I mean, like at this point, you can bet against UConn if you want, but it doesn't seem very logical at this point. You're just basing that on, just UConn having a bad game or something like that. There's no evidence that UConn is going to lose one of these games. So yeah, I'd pick UConn too, but I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Purdue pulled it out. So we'll see.
Would be an amazing redemption. I mean, just obviously Virginia loses to a 16, comes back, wins it all. Could Purdue do it? I mean, it'd be a crazy.
Well, and Matt Painter, I think, is one of the more underrated coaches in the country too. He's been at Purdue forever. I covered an NCAA tournament game in 2007. I was covering Jackson State at the time, and they were the 16 seed playing that Florida team with like Joakim Noah and Al Horford and all those guys. And the 8-9 game was, I believe, Purdue versus Creighton. And Matt Painter, that was 17 years ago, and he had already been there a little bit. So, and another good story was Clemson's coach, Brad Brownell, had been a real solid coach for a long time and finally got deep in the tournament. So anyway, glad to see Matt Painter break through and especially after last year.
Yeah. It'll be fun Saturday, Final Four in Phoenix. David will be in attendance. We'll have to look out for you on the TV. You got to get a good seat.
Right.
But we'll have more.
I'll wear like a Kim Mulkey outfit, like feather boas on the sideline.
I was gonna say those are apparently very expensive, so don't do that.
Maybe I can expense it or something, like so.
Yeah,
I doubt the AP would pay for my feather boa.
Look, what you need to do is you need to find our guy Norlander, just sit by him, because the camera always finds the Guster for Lovers sticker on the laptop. So that's the move. So we'll have more coverage of all Ole Miss sports. Speaking of basketball, a couple semi-breaking news here. Kennedy Todd Williams, the talented guard, has announced she will be returning to Ole Miss next season. So Coach Yo keeps another in the backcourt to go along with Madison Scott. That's huge. And then, as we were talking, David, a source told me Eric Musselman will be in Los Angeles on Wednesday to interview for the SC job.
Really?
So how about that?
Interesting. He's a good coach.
He's a good coach. So that could potentially shake things up in the SEC in more ways than one. We'll follow that one closely because if that does happen, Keith Carter and the brass at Ole Miss will be having to batten down the hatches because I think the Hogs will be calling Chris Beard. But we'll have a transfer portal coverage. Make sure to check out the hub at ohmspirit.com. I got a running list of players that Ole Miss has contacted, updates on who's visiting, who's setting up official visits. There are a couple of visits that have been scheduled. You can read all about that at ohmspirit.com. If you're not a member already, go ahead and get it done. It's only $1. And no, that's not an April Fool's joke. It is $1 to join us at ohmspirit.com. Thanks to David. Appreciate him joining as always. Thanks to College Corner. And of course, thanks to Drew Moak and USA Benefits Group. We will be back tomorrow with another episode of The Flagship. Until then, we out of here.